A small voice, trembling but steady, whispered, "She's still breathing. She's in the closet. Please, you have to help me." What Officer Miller found next shocked and horrified everyone involved. Enjoy the story. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Chapter 1. The Whisper on the Line. The red light on the console pulsed, a silent, urgent beat against the dull hum of the 911 dispatch center. Officer Ben Miller, a veteran of 20 years on the force, slumped slightly in his ergonomic chair. He had heard it all, or so he thought. Every shade of human panic, every desperate plea, every mundane misunderstanding. His days were a rhythmic cycle of the absurd, the tragic, and the tediously routine. This call, however, felt different from the moment the line crackled to life. There was no panic shout, no hysterical sob, just a child's voice, small and careful, as if afraid to break the fragile silence she was so desperately trying to preserve. 911, what is your emergency? Ben recited, his voice practiced, calm, and detached. Hello. The voice was a girl's, no older than 7 or 8. She sounded terribly alone, yet oddly composed. My friend, she's here. She's in the closet. He said it wouldn't hurt, but it did. She's still breathing. Please, you have to help me. Ben frowned, leaning closer to the receiver. A child reporting a friend in a closet? It sounded like a game gone wrong, a sibling squabble, or a vivid imagination. Kids said strange things. They exaggerated. They misunderstood. His mind, conditioned by years of non-emergencies masquerading as crises, immediately jumped to the most benign explanation. Honey, can you tell me where you are? Who is he? There was a slight pause, a faint tremor in the girl's breath that pricked at Ben's professional detachment. I'm at Lily's house, and he's Mr. Henderson. He said he was helping us find Lily, but he already had her. A cold sliver of unease snaked its way up Ben's spine. Mr. Henderson. The name registered immediately. The town was small. Lily Peterson, 7 years old, had been reported missing just hours ago. A frantic search was already underway. Neighbors combing the streets, parents beside themselves with worry. And now, this little voice, calm but laced with an unbearable undercurrent of terror, was suggesting the unthinkable. Okay, sweetie, stay calm. What's your name? Ben kept his voice low, steady, a lifeline across the digital void. Emma. My name is Emma Davison. I'm Lily's best friend. Her voice hitched slightly on best friend. He pictured a small girl, perhaps clutching a doll, trying to be brave. Emma, listen to me very carefully. Is Mr. Henderson there with you now? No, Emma whispered, a rush of air, like she was holding her breath. He went out with Lily's mommy. He said he was gonna look by the old creek, but he already put Lily in the closet. He said she was just playing a sleeping game, but her eyes were shut too tight, and she was making little noises. She's still breathing. Please, you have to hurry. The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying certainty. A missing child, a neighbor helping with the search, a cryptic, chilling detail. He already had her the sleeping game. This was no game. This was real. This was every parent's worst nightmare unfolding on his shift. Ben felt a jolt of adrenaline, a cold dread that quickly morphed into a searing anger. His jaded professionalism evaporated, replaced by a primal need to protect. Emma, you are so brave, Ben said, his voice now imbued with a genuine warmth he rarely let seep into his professional demeanor. You stay right where you are. Don't go near the closet. Don't make a sound. Help is on the way right now. I'm sending officers to Lily's house. You did an amazing job. You are a hero, Emma. He immediately initiated a priority dispatch, his fingers flying across the keyboard, relaying the address and the chilling details to the nearest patrol units. The dispatcher on duty, Sarah, looked at him, her brow furrowed in concern as she overheard his urgent tone. What's going on, Ben? She mouthed. Missing child located, Ben stated, his voice tight with controlled urgency. Possible kidnapping. Child witness on the line. Suspect is Mr. Henderson, neighbor, currently out on the search party. He gave Lily Peterson's address, emphasizing the need for immediate, silent entry. Advise all units. Approach with extreme caution. Child witness on premises, potentially alone. The air in the dispatch center, usually a symphony of ringing phones and low chatter, seemed to quiet, a palpable tension spreading as the implications of his words sank in. Officers were already en route, sirens silent, lights flashing discreetly, racing against time, against the insidious creep of a predator hiding in plain sight. Ben stayed on the line with Emma, keeping her talking, keeping her calm, feeding her small, brave affirmations. He could hear her shallow breaths, the faint sounds of the house around her, the terrifying stillness that often precedes a storm. He felt a profound, unsettling weight settle in his gut. This was not just another call. This was a child's desperate cry for rescue, and it had landed squarely on his watch. He thought, we have to save her. Both of them. Chapter 2. The Deceptive Calm. The patrol car, driven by Officer Rodriguez, pulled up to the Peterson residence, its approach as silent as a predator's. Officer Ben Miller, having relayed the crucial details, had made an unprecedented decision. He was going to the scene himself. The call had resonated too deeply, stirring something long dormant within him. He usually stayed behind the console, a voice, a presence, but rarely a direct participant in the chaotic aftermath. But this was different. He needed to see, to ensure, to protect. As he stepped out of his own unmarked vehicle, the late afternoon sun cast long, deceptive shadows across the tidy suburban street. The scene appeared deceptively normal. A few cars were parked haphazardly along the curb, indicating the presence of concerned neighbors. A small cluster of adults stood on the lawn, their faces etched with worry, talking in hushed tones. They were the search party, clutching flyers with Lily Peterson's innocent, smiling face. The air hummed with a quiet desperation, a collective anxiety for the missing 7-year-old. Officer Rodriguez and his partner, Officer Davies, moved swiftly, their movements precise and practiced, their faces grim. They exchanged quick, urgent glances with Ben. The front door of the Peterson house stood ajar, a silent invitation to a house that was anything but welcoming. Ben scanned the surroundings, his eyes darting from face to face in the small gathering, searching for any telltale sign, any flicker of recognition of the name Emma had uttered. Mr. Henderson. He wondered which one of these ostensibly helpful neighbors was the monster. Inside, the house was immaculate, almost eerily so. A typical suburban home, filled with children's drawings taped to the refrigerator, family photos on the mantelpiece, the comforting clutter of everyday life. But now it felt wrong, a stage set for a terrifying play. The living room was empty, the kitchen equally so. Officer Rodriguez silently pointed towards a small, child-sized shoe peeking out from under a chair in the hallway. It was Lily's. The knot in Ben's stomach tightened. "Emma!" Ben called out, his voice soft, reassuring, yet carrying just enough to cut through the oppressive silence. He heard a rustle, a faint, almost imperceptible sound from the corner of the living room. Tucked behind a large armchair, half hidden by a floral curtain, was a small, trembling figure. It was Emma. She was curled into a tiny ball, her knees drawn to her chest, her face buried in the faded fur of a worn teddy bear. Her small shoulders shook with silent sobs. Ben knelt down, slowly, deliberately, making sure his movements were non-threatening. He kept his hands visible, open, a sign of trust. "Emma? It's Officer Miller. You called me. Do you remember?" Emma slowly lifted her head, her eyes, wide and tear-filled, fixed on him. They were the eyes of a child who had seen too much, understood too little, yet comprehended the enormity of her situation with a frightening clarity. Her blonde hair, usually bouncy, was matted and clung to her damp forehead. She sniffled, her small hand clutching the teddy bear almost to the point of turning white. "You came," she whispered, her voice barely audible. It was a statement of profound relief, a raw testament to her belief that her call, her tiny voice, would be heard. I told you I would, Ben said, a gentle smile touching his lips, a genuine one this time. He extended a hand slowly, palm up. You were so brave, Emma. So incredibly brave. Emma hesitated for a moment. Then, with a surge of desperate trust, uncurled herself and lunged forward, burying her face into Ben's uniform jacket. She clung to him, her small body trembling against his, the soft, muffled sounds of her crying filling the quiet room. Ben instinctively wrapped his arms around her, a protective shield against the world. He felt her small heart hammering against his chest, a desperate, fragile rhythm. He just held her, stroking her hair, letting her tears flow, offering the silent comfort she so desperately needed. In that moment, the jaded veteran was gone, replaced by a simple human being offering solace to a terrified child. Where is the closet, Emma? Ben murmured, his voice barely above a whisper, as he gently loosened her grip and looked into her tear-streaked face. Emma pointed a small, shaking finger towards a door at the end of the hallway, directly opposite the shoe. It was an ordinary closet door, painted white, blending seamlessly with the wall. Nothing about it screamed danger. It looked like any other storage space. But Ben knew better. He knew the most terrifying things often hid in plain sight. Officer Rodriguez and Officer Davies were already there, their hands on their holstered weapons, their faces grim. They nodded at Ben, a silent understanding passing between them. Rodriguez slowly, carefully, reached for the doorknob. The moment was suspended, thick with dread. He turned it. It was unlocked. He pulled the door open. The closet was small, surprisingly deep, and filled with coats and stored items. But at the very back, partially obscured by hanging garments, was a shape. A small, still shape. Lily Peterson. She was curled on the floor, seemingly unconscious. A thin blanket pulled haphazardly over her. Her face was pale, almost translucent, and her breathing was shallow, barely perceptible. Ben's stomach churned. This was far worse than a game. She's breathing? Emma whispered again, her voice cracking with a fragile hope and fear. I told you. She's breathing. You were right, Emma, Ben said, his voice thick with emotion. You were absolutely right. She's going to be okay. Because of you. As the officers carefully, gently, extracted Lily, a wave of relief, cold and sharp, washed over Ben. She was alive, but her drugged state, the deliberate concealment, spoke volumes. This wasn't just a child playing. This was a calculated act. The immediate priority was Lily's medical attention. Paramedics, alerted earlier, were already rushing inside. Just then, the front door burst open, and a woman, distraught and disheveled, rushed in. It was Mrs. Peterson, Lily's mother, her eyes wide with frantic hope. Lily? My Lily? She gasped, seeing the flurry of activity around the closet. Then, her eyes fell on the small, unconscious form of her daughter being carefully lifted by the paramedics. A sob tore from her throat, a raw, primal sound of relief and agony. She rushed forward, only to be gently but firmly restrained by Officer Davies. And then, a man walked in behind her, his face a mask of concern, his brow furrowed with what appeared to be genuine worry. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor, the very picture of a concerned neighbor. He carried a flashlight, its beam still on, as if he had just returned from a futile search. Any news, Mrs. Peterson? I checked the woods again. Nothing. It was Mr. Henderson. His voice was smooth, friendly, almost grandfatherly. He looked directly at Ben, his gaze unwavering, no hint of panic, no flicker of guilt. He looked precisely like what Emma had described. A man helping with the search party, projecting an aura of helpfulness and concern. Ben's blood ran cold. The sheer audacity of the man, returning to the scene of his crime, playing the part of the distraught neighbor, was chilling. This man was a wolf in sheep's clothing, and he had just walked right back into the lion's den. Chapter 3: The Unveiling of Secrets. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. Paramedics quickly assessed Lily, confirming she was heavily sedated but stable. She was gently placed on a stretcher and rushed to the waiting ambulance, Mrs. Peterson following close behind, a hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Officer Miller, still holding Emma, watched them go, a fierce protectiveness rising within him. Emma, now calmer but still clutching her teddy bear, buried her face into his side, as if seeking refuge from the overwhelming reality of the scene. Officer Rodriguez and Officer Davies moved with practiced efficiency, their attention now fully on Mr. Henderson. "Mr. Henderson, can we have a word with you?" Officer Rodriguez's voice was deceptively calm, a trained professional's tone. Mr. Henderson, with his benign, grandfatherly smile, turned, his eyes still conveying concern for Lily. "Of course, officers. Anything I can do to help. This is just dreadful. Poor Lily. What happened? Did you find her? Where was she?" He looked genuinely confused, his performance flawless. He was the picture of an innocent, helpful neighbor. "She was found in the closet, Mr. Henderson," Ben stated, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, his eyes locked onto Henderson's. He watched for the slightest flicker, the smallest tremor. There was none. Henderson's face remained a mask of polite shock. "The closet," Henderson repeated, his eyebrows raising in apparent surprise. "Good heavens. All this time, how could she have gotten in there? That poor child must have been so frightened. I just can't imagine." His voice dripped with false sympathy. "Emma, can you tell us again what happened?" Ben asked, looking at the little girl beside him. He wanted Henderson to hear it directly from the child, to see if his carefully constructed facade would crack under the raw innocence of a child's truth. Emma, her small face still streaked with dried tears, looked up at Ben. Then her gaze shifted to Mr. Henderson. A tremor ran through her small body, but her eyes, wide and clear, held a surprising resolve. She was scared, yes, but she was also incredibly brave. "He told Lily to play a sleeping game," Emma said, her voice soft but steady, directed at Ben. "He said it was a secret game, and we couldn't tell anyone. He said if we told, something bad would happen to my mommy." Mr. Henderson's smile faltered, just for a fleeting second, an almost imperceptible tightening around his eyes. But then it was back, reinforced, more practiced. "Now, Emma," he chuckled, a forced, brittle sound. "You know we were just playing pretend, sweetheart. You and Lily have such wonderful imaginations. Remember the game where we were adventurers, and Lily was the princess hiding from the dragons?" Emma shook her head, her gaze unwavering.
"No."
This was different. He made Lily drink something from a cup. He said it would help her sleep for the game. But she was too sleepy. Her eyes wouldn't open all the way, and she made little noises. Her voice dropped to a whisper, filled with the horror of the memory. Yucky noises, like she was choking. Mrs. Davison, Emma's mother, burst through the door then, her face a mixture of frantic worry and rising anger. She had heard about the discovery of Lily and rushed over immediately. She had been searching for Emma, too, assuming she was with Lily's mother. "Emma! Oh my God, Emma!" She rushed to her daughter, pulling her into a fierce, protective embrace. "Are you all right, sweetie? What happened?" "Mummy, Mr. Henderson put Lily in the closet," Emma said, her voice muffled against her mother's shoulder, but clear enough for everyone to hear. "He gave her sleepy juice, and he told me if I told, you would get hurt." Mrs. Davison froze, her eyes widening in disbelief and dawning horror. She pulled back slightly, looking at Emma's tear-streaked face, then at Mr. Henderson, and finally at Officer Miller. Her initial reaction was one of confusion, a desperate hope that this was all a terrible misunderstanding. Mr. Henderson was a pillar of the community, a kind, helpful man who often volunteered at the school. He had always been so friendly, so concerned. Couldn't be him, could it? "Emma, honey, are you sure?" Mrs. Davison asked, her voice trembling. "Mr. Henderson wouldn't. He's always so kind." It was the voice of a parent struggling to reconcile a horrifying accusation with a carefully constructed image of a trusted adult. She wanted to believe her daughter, but the cognitive dissonance was jarring. "He did, Mummy," Emma insisted, her small voice rising in urgency, her tiny fists clenching her mother's shirt. "He said it was our secret, a scary secret. He said I had to be a brave girl and keep the secret or you would cry forever." The words, so stark, so chilling in their childlike simplicity, struck Mrs. Davison like a physical blow. The manipulation, the insidious threats veiled in a child's understanding of permanence and fear, tore through her denial. She looked at Mr. Henderson then, truly looked at him, and saw not the kind neighbor but the predatory glint in his eyes, the subtle shift in his posture, the almost imperceptible tensing of his jaw. Her disbelief shattered, replaced by a visceral, burning rage, a fierce protectiveness that dwarfed all other emotions. Her child, her innocent Emma, had seen this man's true face, and he had threatened her. "You!" Mrs. Davison gasped, her voice raw, a primal growl escaping her throat. She stepped forward, her hand reaching out instinctively, as if to strike him, but Officer Rodriguez smoothly, subtly, moved to block her path, a silent warning to maintain order. Mr. Henderson, seeing his carefully cultivated facade crumbling, finally let his own mask slip. His friendly smile evaporated, replaced by a cold, calculating sneer. Now, Carol," he said, his voice dropping to a low, menacing tone. "Let's not get hysterical. Children have wild imaginations, especially when they're scared. Little Emma is just confused. She's probably seen too many scary movies." His eyes darted to Emma, a clear, unmistakable threat in their depths. Emma flinched, instinctively recoiling into her mother's embrace. But Mrs. Davison's eyes, now blazing with a fury Ben had rarely witnessed, met Henderson's without flinching. "Don't you dare speak to my daughter like that," she spat, her voice vibrating with barely contained rage. "Don't you dare try to twist her words. She is telling the truth. And you monster, you will pay for what you did to Lily, and for what you tried to do to my Emma." Officer Miller stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Mrs. Davison's shoulder. "Mr. Henderson, you're coming with us," he stated, his voice firm, unwavering. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you." Henderson's face contorted, a mixture of rage and desperation flickering in his eyes. He opened his mouth as if to protest, to continue his charade, but the words seemed to catch in his throat. He looked around wildly, seeing the determined faces of the officers, the furious gaze of Mrs. Davison, and the small, brave eyes of Emma. His charming persona had finally collapsed, leaving behind only the ugliness of his true self. Officer Rodriguez and Officer Davies moved in, their hands on his arms, and led him away out of the house, away from the scene of his vile deception. As the cruiser doors slammed shut, a collective sigh of relief seemed to ripple through the neighborhood. Mrs. Davison held Emma tightly, tears now mingling with those of her daughter, but these were tears of gratitude and fierce love. The alliance was solidified. Emma, her mother, and Officer Miller. They stood together, united not just by the immediate crisis, but by the profound revelation that one small voice, brave enough to speak, could shatter the most elaborate of deceptions. They knew their battle had just begun, for this was more than just one man. This was about a pattern, a system that had failed to protect. Chapter 4: The Walls of Complacency. In the days that followed, the initial relief that Lily was safe and Mr. Henderson was in custody began to curdle into a bitter frustration. Officer Miller, now personally invested in the case, felt it acutely. Emma's harrowing testimony, Lily's sedated state, and Henderson's chilling manipulation formed a clear picture of heinous intent. Yet, as the investigation unfolded, they encountered precisely what Ben had come to dread: the formidable, unyielding walls of systemic bureaucracy and adult complacency. The local police department, initially dismissive of Lily's disappearance as merely a runaway child, found itself under intense scrutiny. The internal report on Lily's case had been cursory, prioritizing routine procedures over genuine investigative zeal. Ben tried to push for a more thorough review of similar past incidents, but he met with resistance. He was told, almost politely, that his enthusiasm, while commendable, was unprofessional. The department, it seemed, was more concerned with managing public perception and avoiding internal scandal than digging into uncomfortable truths. "Officer Miller, we appreciate your diligence," Captain Hayes had stated, his tone carefully neutral. "But we have a protocol for missing persons. Lily Peterson was not a high-risk runaway according to the initial assessment. And now that she's found, and the suspect apprehended, we can close this chapter. Captain, the child was drugged and hidden in a closet in her own home by a trusted neighbor," Ben argued, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Emma's testimony indicates a history of manipulation and threats. We need to look deeper. How many times has Mr. Henderson done this before? How many times have we missed the signs?" Captain Hayes sighed, running a hand over his receding hairline. "Ben, Mr. Henderson has no prior record. He's a pillar of the community, a volunteer. We can't just go on a witch hunt based on a child's testimony that's still being processed. We have to be careful not to damage reputations or invite frivolous lawsuits. This is a very sensitive situation for the town."
Ben shieted.
Damage reputations? What about the damage to a child's life? What about the safety of other children? The system, designed to protect, was instead protecting its own image, its own flawed processes. Mrs. Davison faced similar resistance at Lily's school. When she tried to inquire about any previous incidents involving Mr. Henderson, perhaps during his volunteer work, the principal, Mr. Harrison, was evasive and defensive. "Mrs. Davison, we have strict privacy policies. Mr. Henderson was a respected volunteer. We've never had any complaints. Children are prone to imaginative stories, especially after a traumatic event. My daughter is not imaginative. Mr. Harrison," Mrs. Davison snapped, her voice trembling with barely suppressed fury. "She's telling the truth, and if you didn't have any complaints, it's because this man intimidated children into silence. Did you check the security cameras? Did you review who had access to the children during his volunteer shifts?" Mr. Harrison folded his hands on his desk, his expression unyielding. "Our cameras have blind spots, and all volunteers are vetted. We have no reason to believe any other child was at risk. I understand your concern, but we must be careful not to create panic where none is warranted." The school, like the police, was more interested in maintaining a facade of safety than in uncovering unsettling truths. Ben, growing increasingly frustrated with the official channels, decided to pursue unofficial avenues. He started talking to people in the community not as an officer, but as a concerned citizen. He visited parks, community centers, anywhere children gathered. He spoke to parents, subtly inquiring about Mr. Henderson, about any unusual behavior, any odd stories their children might have told. Most dismissed him, echoing the official line, "Mr. Henderson? Oh, he's such a lovely man. Always so kind to the children." But then, a glimmer of hope. Ben was sitting on a park bench, observing a group of children playing, when an older woman, her silver hair neatly pulled back, sat beside him. It was Mrs. Albright, a retired elementary school teacher who had lived in the neighborhood for over 50 years. She was known for her sharp mind and even sharper observations. She had taught Lily's grandmother. "You're Officer Miller, aren't you?" Mrs. Albright asked, her voice quiet but firm. "I saw you at the Peterson house the other day, and I saw them take away Mr. Henderson." She paused, her eyes, clear and perceptive, fixed on Ben. "Good riddance, I say. That man always gave me the creeps." Ben felt a surge of hope. "You thought so too, Mrs. Albright?" "Indeed," she nodded slowly. "He had a way about him. Too charming, if you ask me. Always seemed to gravitate towards the children, especially the quieter ones. He volunteered at the school when I was still teaching before I retired. He was always hovering, always offering to help with the kids who seemed to need a little extra attention. I remember one little boy, Tommy Jenkins, he used to be so outgoing. After spending a few afternoons with Mr. Henderson, He became very withdrawn. Started wetting the bed. His parents thought it was just a phase. But I had a feeling. A bad feeling. Did you ever report it, Mrs. Albright? Ben asked, leaning forward, his voice urgent. Oh, I mentioned it to the principal at the time, Mr. Davies, bless his soul. He dismissed it. Said Tommy was probably just overwhelmed by a new class. Said Mr. Henderson was a godsend, always helping out. The system, Officer Miller, it prefers not to see what it doesn't want to see. It's easier to dismiss a child's mood or imagination than to confront a trusted adult. Mrs. Albright's words resonated deeply with Ben. She understood the insidious nature of the system, the protective shell it built around itself. Did you ever hear anything else? About Mr. Henderson? Or other children? She paused, her gaze distant, as if sifting through decades of memories. Well, he moved here about 10 years ago from out of state. I remember him saying something about leaving a difficult past behind. Always seemed a bit too eager to blend in. And then there was the Graham's little girl, Bethany. She spent a lot of time at Mr. Henderson's house after school, before her parents got home. Then suddenly the Grahams moved away. Very suddenly.
No explanaschen.
Just packed up and left one weekend. Ben's mind raced. A sudden move. A withdrawn child. The pieces were starting to connect, forming a chilling pattern. This wasn't an isolated incident with Lily. This was a predator who had honed his craft, moving from place to place, exploiting trust, leaving behind a trail of unspoken trauma and adult complacency. The true scope of Mr. Henderson's activities was far wider, far more insidious than anyone in power seemed willing to acknowledge. Ben knew he couldn't fight this alone. He needed a network, people who, like Mrs. Albright, were willing to see what others chose to ignore. He thought, we have to unearth the truth. For all of them. Chapter 5. Seeds of Doubt and Whispers of Truth. The seeds of doubt, once planted by Emma's brave voice, began to sprout in the fertile ground of community fear and concern. Officer Miller, encouraged by Mrs. Albright's insights, continued his quiet, unofficial investigation. He realized that the official channels, hampered by bureaucracy and a desire to maintain the town's placid image, would not yield the full truth. He needed to find the quiet whispers, the forgotten incidents, the parents who had felt a prickle of unease but had no proof, no one to believe them. Mrs. Davison, fueled by a fierce maternal rage and a profound guilt for not having seen the truth sooner, became a relentless advocate. She refused to let the school dismiss Emma's statements. She contacted other parents, cautiously, subtly, raising the topic of Mr. Henderson, observing their reactions. Some were defensive, clinging to the image of the benevolent neighbor. Others, however, harbored their own unspoken unease. You know, one mother, Mrs. Chen, confessed to Mrs. Davison during a school pickup, her voice low. My son, Alex, he used to play at Mr. Henderson's house sometimes. Mr. Henderson had the most amazing train set. Alex loved it. But then Alex started having nightmares. He'd wake up screaming about bad secrets and sleepy time. I thought it was just a phase, or a reaction to a video game. She wrung her hands. Mr. Henderson was always so good with him, so patient. I never thought. Her voice trailed off, guilt etched on her face. These fragmented stories, these half-forgotten anxieties, began to coalesce. Officer Miller and Mrs. Davison compiled them, cautiously sharing their findings. They met secretly, sometimes in Mrs. Albright's cozy living room, surrounded by her old books and the comforting scent of herbal tea. Mrs. Albright, with her extensive memory of the town's history and its families, became the unofficial archivist of these hidden truths. The Graham's daughter, Bethany, Mrs. Albright mused one evening. She was always such a vibrant child. Then, just before they moved, she became withdrawn, quiet. Her parents said she was just being difficult, refusing to go to school. I remember Mr. Henderson was particularly attentive to her during that period, always offering to drive her home or walk her to the park. She pointed to an old photo album on her lap, a faded picture of a young, smiling Bethany. Children often express distress through changes in behavior, not through words. It's our job as adults to listen, even when they aren't speaking. Officer Miller followed up on the lead about Mr. Henderson's previous town, discreetly contacting a former colleague in that state. It was a long shot, but he felt a growing certainty. His colleague, a grizzled detective named Detective Jones, initially met his inquiries with skepticism. Henderson? Don't recall the name. Clean record. Check for informal complaints, Ben urged. Behavioral issues. Anything dismissed as child's imagination or misunderstanding. A week later, Detective Jones called back, his voice grim. You were right, Miller. There was a case. A cold case. A 4-year-old boy fell down some stairs, broke his arm. The parents said it was an accident. The boy, however, started exhibiting extreme fear of adults' separation anxiety. The caseworker at the time, a young woman just out of college, suspected abuse, but couldn't get the parents to cooperate. Mr. Henderson lived next door to them. He was supposedly a good friend of the family, helped them out with childcare a lot. Anything else? Ben pressed, his heart pounding. Yeah, Jones sighed. The caseworker, a Dr. Lena Hansen, tried to push it. She even wrote up an internal report, noting unexplained injuries and child's regressive behavior linked to prolonged exposure to a non-family adult male caregiver. But it was dismissed. Said there wasn't enough concrete evidence. The family moved away shortly after. And the report was buried, labeled unsubstantiated claims. Dr. Lena Hansen. The name clicked. She was a child psychologist, renowned in her field, now retired, and living just a few towns over. This was the crucial piece of evidence, the buried report from a professional that could connect the dots. This was the turning point. Meanwhile, Emma, though still grappling with the trauma, began to heal, her bravery serving as a beacon. She spent time with a child therapist recommended by Officer Miller, slowly, carefully, recounting the scary secrets Mr. Henderson had made her promise to keep. The therapist, Dr. Eleanor Vance, was a quiet, empathetic woman who understood the nuanced language of childhood trauma. Emma is incredibly perceptive, Dr. Vance told Officer Miller and Mrs. Davison during a private session. She didn't just see a monster. She saw the manipulation, the threats. She understands the power of secrets, and she understands the devastating impact of breaking trust. Her ability to articulate these complex feelings, even using childlike metaphors, is quite remarkable. One afternoon, Emma, drawing quietly in her room, called her mother. Mummy, remember when Lily and I went to Mr. Henderson's house to see his magic tricks? Mrs. Davison sat beside her daughter, her heart aching. Yes, sweetie. You told me he showed you a coin trick. He had a box, Emma said, pointing to a small, lidded box she had drawn on her paper. He called it his treasure box. He said only special children knew about it. And when he made Lily go to sleep for the game, he took something out of her pocket and put it in the box. A little shiny button from her coat. Emma's eyes were wide, remembering a detail that had seemed insignificant at the time, but now, in the light of the unfolding truth, gleamed with new, terrifying meaning. He said it was a special keepsake from his best secret friends, a hidden treasure box of trinkets taken from victims. This was it. Physical evidence. The chilling realization hit Mrs. Davison like a tidal wave. This wasn't just about Lily. This was a pattern, a collection of trophies, a dark history hidden in plain sight. Officer Miller immediately secured a search warrant for Mr. Henderson's house, now under police custody but awaiting full processing. He knew this was the moment. The combination of Dr. Hansen's buried report, the fragmented testimonies from parents, and now Emma's precise detail about the treasure box. It was enough to blow the case wide open. The walls of complacency were about to come crashing down. This was the chance to expose not just a predator, but the systemic failures that allowed him to thrive. Chapter 6. The Unraveling and the Public Reckoning. The search of Mr. Henderson's immaculate house felt like an invasion into a carefully constructed facade. Every perfect pillow, every polished surface, every neatly arranged book seemed to mock the horrific truth it concealed. Officer Miller, accompanied by a team of forensics experts, meticulously combed through the property. And then, in a hidden compartment behind a loose brick in the fireplace, they found it. A small, ornate wooden box. It was Mr. Henderson's treasure box. Inside, nestled amongst layers of velvet, were dozens of small, seemingly innocuous items. A tarnished silver locket, a bright red hair clip, a tiny plastic dinosaur, a smooth skipping stone, a faded ribbon, and yes, a shiny button, identical to the ones on Lily Peterson's coat. Each item, small and insignificant on its own, represented a stolen piece of childhood, a moment of terror, a violation. This was concrete evidence, undeniable and chilling. Each trinket was a trophy, a silent scream of a child's story never told. Alongside the box, they discovered a meticulously kept journal. Not a diary of feelings, but a cold, calculating ledger. Dates, names, small notes like quiet one, fearful, good listener, easily manipulated. It was a horrifying chronicle of his predation, spanning years, moving across states. The initial unsubstantiated claims from Dr. Lena Hansen's buried report, detailing the case of Tommy Jenkins, were corroborated by an entry in the journal. His charming facade had crumbled, revealing the true monster underneath. With the irrefutable evidence in hand, the case against Mr. Henderson was no longer a matter of a child's word against an adult's. It was a slam dunk. But Officer Miller, Mrs. Davison, and Mrs. Albright knew this wasn't just about putting Henderson behind bars. It was about exposing the systemic failures that had allowed him to operate for so long, to prevent it from ever happening again. They needed a public forum, a moment of reckoning, to ensure the community understood the depth of the betrayal and the importance of listening to children. The town hall meeting was scheduled for a week later. Word spread like wildfire through the community. The initial shock had given way to a collective outrage. Parents, who had previously dismissed their own children's vague anxieties, now looked at their little ones with a new, agonizing fear and guilt. The community was no longer complacent. It was wounded, raw, and desperate for answers. The town hall was packed. Every seat was taken and people lined the walls. Mrs. Peterson sat in the front row, holding Lily's small hand, her face still pale, but with a new strength in her eyes. Lily, though still undergoing therapy, was healing, slowly returning to herself. Emma, holding her mother's hand tightly, sat beside them. Officer Miller, in uniform, stood at the podium, a grave expression on his face. Behind him sat Captain Hayes, his face noticeably paler than usual, and Principal Harrison, looking distinctly uncomfortable. Dr. Lena Hansen, now a frail but dignified elder, sat in the front row, a quiet strength emanating from her. "Good evening," Officer Miller began, his voice resonating through the hushed hall. "We are here tonight to discuss a grave injustice. An injustice that was allowed to fester due to complacency, due to a failure to listen to the most vulnerable among us." He then laid out the case, detailing the findings from Mr. Henderson's house, the treasure box, the journal, the corroborating evidence from Dr. Hansen's buried report. He described Mr. Henderson's history, his calculated manipulation, his horrific pattern of behavior. A collective gasp rippled through the audience when he held up a photograph of the trinkets found in the box. Many parents recognized items that had mysteriously gone missing from their own children. The murmurs grew louder, turning into a roar of disbelief, then fury. Then, Emma's voice, small but amplified by the microphone, cut through the noise. "He said it was a secret," she said, her voice clear, brave, yet filled with the echoes of her fear. She stood beside Officer Miller, clutching her teddy bear, looking out at the sea of faces. "He said if I told, my mummy would cry forever. But I knew it was wrong. I knew Lily needed help. Your voice matters. My mummy told me, and Officer Miller told me." A wave of emotion washed over the crowd. Tears streamed down faces. The simplicity of her truth, her unwavering courage, was a powerful indictment of the adult world's failure. Mrs. Davison, standing beside Emma, put her arm around her daughter, her eyes shining with pride and unshed tears. Captain Hayes then stood, his voice uncharacteristically contrite. As captain of this police department, I stand before you today to acknowledge our failings. We should have listened sooner. We should have investigated more thoroughly. The initial report on Lily Peterson's disappearance was inadequate. We failed this community, and more importantly, we failed these children. He announced immediate, sweeping changes. A new protocol for all child-related calls, mandatory training for all officers on recognizing signs of abuse and manipulation, and a dedicated task force to review all past unsubstantiated claims involving children. He called it the Emma Protocol. Principal Harrison, looking chastened, followed. He, too, apologized, announcing an overhaul of the school's volunteer vetting process, an immediate review of all camera blind spots, and new programs to teach children how to identify and report unsafe situations. The climax of the evening came when Dr. Lena Hansen, frail but resolute, rose to speak. 20 years ago, she said, her voice clear despite her age, I filed a report that was dismissed. A child suffered because the system preferred to look away. Today, thanks to the courage of a little girl, that systemic blindness is being challenged. We must never again dismiss a child's story, no matter how unbelievable it may seem. Their voices are our early warning system. Their whispers are our alarms. The verdict against Mr. Henderson was swift and decisive. Overwhelmed by the mountain of evidence, and facing a public outcry, he pleaded guilty to kidnapping, child endangerment, and multiple counts of sexual assault. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Justice, in its purest form, had been served. The community, initially shattered by the revelation, began a slow, painful process of healing. But out of the ashes of betrayal, something beautiful emerged. A stronger, more vigilant network of support. Parents formed new groups, advocating for child safety, sharing resources, and creating a vigilant watch over their children. The quiet whispers of doubt were now loud, collective shouts for protection. Emma, the small, brave accidental hero, had not only saved Lily but had awakened an entire town. Chapter 7. A New Dawn, a Shared Purpose. 6 months had passed since the town hall meeting, since Mr. Henderson's chilling confession and subsequent imprisonment. The air in the town, once heavy with unspoken fears and polite pretenses, now felt cleaner, clearer, filled with a new kind of vigilance. The scars remained, deep and raw, but they were healing, slowly, purposefully. The Peterson family, though forever changed, was finding its way back to normalcy. Lily, with the unwavering support of her parents and the gentle guidance of therapists, was blossoming once more. Her laughter, once hesitant, now echoed freely through the house. She and Emma were inseparable, their bond forged in shared trauma and enduring love. They were more than best friends. They were survivors, their resilience a testament to the power of courage and the warmth of a community that had finally woken up. The Emma Protocol had indeed been implemented at the police department. Officer Miller had been promoted to lead a newly formed child safety and advocacy unit. His desk, once merely a place for processing calls, was now a hub of proactive outreach. He visited schools, community centers, giving presentations on recognizing the signs of abuse, emphasizing the absolute importance of listening to children. His voice, once jaded, now carried the conviction of renewed purpose. He was no longer just a dispatcher. He was a fierce advocate, his path irrevocably altered by a brave little girl. You know, Ben often told new recruits, I used to think my job was about procedures, about following the book. But Emma taught me it's about listening, truly listening, with your heart as much as your ears. It's about recognizing that courage often whispers, and that trust is the most sacred thing we build with those who need us most. He found immense satisfaction in his new role. The exhaustion he once felt replaced by a profound sense of meaning. He often stopped by the Davison house, just to check in, to see Emma's bright smile. He considered her family almost an extension of his own. Mrs. Davison, too, had transformed. The initial guilt she felt for her momentary disbelief had morphed into an unshakable determination. She spearheaded a community initiative, Voices for Children, organizing workshops, support groups, and a network of vigilant parents. She worked closely with Dr. Vance and Mrs. Albright, who had become a cherished mentor and a fount of wisdom. Mrs. Albright, with her years of experience, often said, "The truth hides in the small details, in the things we dismiss. It is a quiet thing, but it has the power to roar when given a platform." The community itself was a testament to the power of collective action. Neighborhood watch groups became more active, their focus now sharply tuned to the safety of children. Parents looked out for each other, no longer isolated in their anxieties. The silence that had once protected a predator was now broken by the constant hum of communication, of concern, of active protection. They had learned a painful but vital lesson. True community safety wasn't just about locked doors and alarm systems. It was about open eyes, open ears, and open hearts. Emma, now 8 years old, was happy. She was thriving in school, her innate wisdom still shining through in her thoughtful observations and her quiet confidence. She had become an inspiration, a symbol of bravery. Other children, emboldened by her story, found their own voices, sharing worries or concerns they might have once kept hidden. She taught them, without even knowing it, that their feelings were valid, their fears were important, and their voices had the power to change the world. One sunny afternoon, Officer Miller found Emma and Lily playing in the park. Lily laughed as Emma pushed her higher and higher on the swing. He sat on a nearby bench, watching them, a peaceful smile on his face. Mrs. Davison joined him, a cup of coffee in her hand. "It's amazing, isn't it?" Mrs. Davison murmured, her gaze soft as she watched the girls. "How much has changed? How much we've learned." "It all started with her," Ben said, nodding towards Emma. "One brave voice." Mrs. Davison squeezed his arm gently. "One brave voice, yes, but also one adult who listened, truly listened, even when it sounded impossible. We saved each other, Ben. Emma saved Lily, and she saved us all by teaching us to listen. You saved her by believing her, and in doing so, you found your own new purpose." He looked at her, then back at Emma, his heart full. She was right. He had thought he was just doing his job, but Emma's desperate call had woken him up, had shown him the true meaning of service, the profound impact of compassion. He had been jaded, worn down by the routine, but now he felt more alive, more purposeful than ever before. He thought, we saved each other, every single one of us. The sun dipped lower, casting long, golden shadows across the park. The laughter of the children, innocent and pure, filled the air. And in that moment it was clear. A single, brave child's voice, when amplified by believing adults and a collective community, has the power to expose hidden wrongs, to heal broken systems, and to inspire a future where every child feels safe enough to speak their truth. Your voice matters. It always does.